recording. All right, so question, or this first part, so chapter 11 begins with Jesus' interaction with John's disciples when they brought the question from their master in prison, "Are you the one who was to come, or shall we look for another?" In verse 3. And then Jesus told them to remind John of the messianic prophecies that were being fulfilled in his ministry. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear, and the dead are raised up, and the poor have good news preached to them. The miraculous signs of Jesus' compassionate ministry would encourage the faith of John, who, as the Lord's way preparer, had keyed in on the more forceful and decisive prophecies about the Messiah. Jesus then spoke to the crowds about John and himself, their contrasting lifestyles and ministries, and how neither of them had satisfied those who carry their own perceptions about the kingdom of God. Then Jesus said, or denounced, the callous unbelief of the cities in which most of his miracles had been performed. So, okay, here's some fill in the blanks. Suddenly, with an abrupt change of thought and mood, Jesus praised the Father because he had hidden these things from the blank and revealed them to blank. So, what do you think?
Hidden from the wise and understanding.
Yeah.
And revealed them to little children.
Little children.
Yeah. Wise and understanding and little children. Yes, very good. 126. So what, though, is it about humanistic religious thought that causes its proponents to reject the good news of Jesus? Could I have someone read Luke 18, 9 through 14, please?
I can do that. People have it. Luke 18, 9 through 14. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. Two men went up into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus, "God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I get." But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even lift up his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." I tell you, this man who went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted.
Okay. And can I have someone read 1 Corinthians 1, 18 through 25?
I've got it.
Thank you, Kathy.
For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs and Greeks seek wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and folly to Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men.
Okay, very good. So that first question, what is it about humanistic religious thought that causes its proponents to reject the good news? Yes, John?
They think you have to do something in order to receive salvation. Like, you have to do so many different things. You have to fast and you have to tithe. And those things are good, but they're not really required, because if you believe, you get to eternal life. But they think that you have a specific list of things to do.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. And it's, yeah, exactly. It is, they require all these things that we have to do in order to merit God's, salvation, or merit salvation, or merit God's favor, or and I think it's just our human tendency. It's we need to do something, or we want to do something, or to contribute, particularly to, the religious, leaders. It was all sort of about the outward appearance, but they look good outside, but but like they're like bones, and and the inside is mentioned, and that's not what we read, but it's really kind of what's important on the inside, but it isn't about what we do. You're right.
They think it's all about me. We have a lot of that nowadays.
Right, it's all about me. Yes, you're right, John, and both John. So John squared. But they do. There's a lot of the, just selfish pride and things that are kind of going on, at least now. And unfortunately, I think it's kind of sad you don't see a lot of humbleness in people much anymore. And even in sort of the leaders as well, which is sad, I think, to me. And I think there certainly could be more of that. So I don't know. I think just this whole situation with the virus, and it's humbling anyway, at least I think, but I don't know. You're right. Yeah.
People wear masks to protect themselves, but that it's not to protect you, it's to protect others.
Yeah.
That's why I wear a mask.
Yeah. And and I think I have a solution later for worship, so I can wear my mask. So I've got the amplifier set up a different way, so I think it'll work. But yeah, I think we do that so that we can protect others, and again, it is looking out for others. That's important. What about then the other question? What is it about little children that lets them to be responsive to the gospel? Could somebody read Matthew 18, 1-4? I have a volunteer, please.
I got it.
Thank you, John.
Just wait a second. 1-4?
Yep, 18, 1-4.
Okay. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And calling to him a child, he put him in the midst of them, and said, "Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven."
Okay, very good. All right, so back to the question. What is it about little children that lets them be responsive to the gospel?
Humble,
yeah.
innocent.
I wonder, though, children at that time were not given as much freedom to say what they think as they are today. I think it's an interesting thing, because I wouldn't necessarily think of, some children are humble, some are not, in today's world. But what children are is they are receptive to what other people tell them without questioning it. So adults, we're all like Thomas, and that's the other piece of it. We say, why the wise and understanding? Why not the wise? Because the wise have come to believe that their analysis of evidence is sufficient to explain everything. And a child is still soaking things up. They're still in this phase of learning by what other people tell them. Mm-hmm. And so, you have to be able to willfully suspend disbelief in order to believe some of the things that are in the Bible, and as an adult, the only way you can do that is if you have enough humility to recognize there are some things that we can't understand using human powers of understanding.
exactly. I think it is a good point too. I mean, with children at that time, probably, yeah, there maybe was less, I don't know,
They
individual.
were probably seen and not heard.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they could, I mean,
Probably,
it
yeah.
took, what, 2.5 days for Jesus' parents to miss him coming back from the temple.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
I, wow, like, oh, like, sort of like, where's Jesus? That's true. I mean, you just sort of wonder, but, again, it's like, well, maybe he was with somebody or, some other member of the family, who knows? But yeah, it's interesting. But I think you're right, Kathy, kind of seen and not heard, probably more so. But yeah, so I think there's just something about they are more receptive to it, or they don't necessarily question things as much as we do as adults. And I think it's just our nature to question and to explore and to and find answers to things. And some things, like, we just can't, we just don't know, and maybe never will. So, but that's okay too. Okay, so what about, and then mentions here, that is the Father's good pleasure to reveal spiritual truth to little children and to hide it from the worldly wise is expanded on in Jesus' words about himself and his Father and those who are led to know and follow him. So it's revealed to children, but not necessarily the wise, but maybe for good good reason. So 127, so what sense have all things been handed over to Jesus by his Father? Let's take a look at, so it's John 5, 21 through 23. I can do that one. Okay. Oops. Hold on a second. All right. 5, 21 through 23 says, so Jesus says, for as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, so also the Son gives life to whom he will. For the Father judges no one, but has given all judgment to the Son, that all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father. Whoever does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. Okay, so with that in mind, in what sense have all things been handed over to Jesus by his Father? And then the other question is, what's implied? No one knows the Son except the Father. No one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Okay, so what do you think about that? Those questions.
We don't really know exactly, like, the true nature of God. He's always mysterious, and he works in different ways in different times, and nobody really knows him except for the Son, and nobody knows Jesus as much, because when he came, he was pretty mysterious too. Nobody really knew much about him. Well, he's the carpenter's son, and that's pretty much all they knew about him.
Yeah.
And you never, like, hear much about, like, their outer appearance. Like,
no.
if Jesus came, I think you would know, but if Jesus came in, like, a big crowd, it would be kind of hard to tell.
Yeah, there's sort of a verse in Isaiah. It's like, it's not like he was kind of along the lines. It's like he wasn't really anything like,
no stately form, no majesty.
yeah,
That one? Yeah.
exactly, that we should look on him. It's not. Yeah, I don't think he was maybe like looked like a movie star. I doubt. Yes, dear.
So I think that God did that on purpose, so that is, if you look at the different cultures, Jesus looks like the culture of the people, and in African American, he's an African American, and a lot of cultures, he's Hispanic looking. That way, he's by not giving us what he looks like. We can
adaptable.
Make him to be something that we can connect with, and maybe that was why they did it that way.
Yeah. I think there's a good, aspect of that when you think about it. And it's like each culture, it is interesting how each culture has a different image of Jesus. And it's like we don't really know what he looked like, but probably maybe that's good in a way. It's funny, we do have those certain images that keep sort of coming up, and I always find that interesting. There seems to be kind of a particular kind of image, and you probably, you've seen it too in different forms, but yeah.
Well, I also want to say, like, when we look and we can see a Mormon Jesus, so hey, that's a Mormon Jesus, because it looks different. Like they take different characteristics, and you can clearly say, hey, that's a Mormon Jesus, whereas
his beard is long.
a Lutheran Jesus doesn't look like a Mormon Jesus. Do you guys agree with me? Like, there's different Jesus.
Oh, you're right. They do have a particular image that they use, and which is
different pictures, same.
Yeah, and I don't know, and I don't know if it's sort of certain characteristics, I think, that each culture sort of, I guess, maybe wants or needs. I think there's some of that too, and and probably too that each culture, I think, kind of wants him to at least kind of look like, like their culture. I mean, probably most likely he's going to look like a Palestinian, man. I mean, if we probably saw him today, darker skin, and that's probably the most likely. I mean, we don't really know for sure, but it's pretty.
Well, he wouldn't blend in if he didn't.
No.
If you wouldn't know him to look at him that he was anything different or special.
Yeah.
It's just
in that region of the world.
Yeah.
Must look like those folks. Of course, there's a range there too, but it doesn't go. The Lutheran Jesus is definitely European.
Definitely European.
And that is my favorite picture, but
oh yeah, I do,
what I grew up with, and so it's probably not very accurate at all.
That's okay.
But
no,
and I also don't think he would be African looking, because then he wouldn't have blended in. I mean, it was clear. They recognized the Ethiopian eunuch, for example.
Oh yeah, right.
Probably by his look, he looked like he was from that country.
And his dress, like in the pictures of that, he's got like purple, and he's got like.
Well, yeah, but that's modern interpretation too, but it's what you would have worn if you were in the courts and serving rich people.
Oh yeah.
You would probably have to dress appropriately.
Yeah, and and there's different, like even in some of the Egyptian hieroglyphs and pictures and stuff of other cultures, like they look, different, and or even like with, the Hebrews and stuff had a particular, bless you, John, particular look too. I mean, they obviously, they look a lot different. There's sort of the beards and everything versus, the Egyptians with the sort of shaved heads and the kind of funny goatee type things. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, they do represent each culture kind of differently depending on, who they are and where they're from. And so I find that kind of fascinating as well. Yeah, I mean, I think, but I think his image is, or, he wasn't anything, necessarily wonderful. I mean, probably to look at, but then I think it's what he did that, of course, distinguished him. And of course, when he starts doing miracles and things, and I'm sure then they're kind of like, oh, okay, this guy, he's somebody, and at first it's like, well, maybe he's just one of the prophets or Elijah or someone else. And, so they're kind of thinking that too. And so it's kind of interesting. But like going kind of back to the question, I mean, with the Jesus and the Father, I mean, they know the Father knows, the Son, and the Son knows Jesus. And it's, I mean, really because of that intimate relation, because they're God, they're the Godhead. And Jesus was refers to, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, or I and the Father are one. And so in a way, it's like we, as human beings, at least, we're able to see, God, in human flesh, obviously. But again, he didn't look really probably any different than anybody else, but obviously the miracles and the signs and the wonders are pointing to definitely who he is.
And I don't know, Josh, that nowadays it means a lot to know exactly what he looked like. We grew up with a certain picture of Jesus. Other people have grown up with different pictures of Jesus.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder of our faith is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go into church, like I did in my home congregation, there were 3 depictions of Jesus in the stained glass windows. One on the cross, one is the shepherd, and I can't remember the other one. I think it was teaching when he was preaching to the people.
Yeah.
And so that is a reminder to us of our faith, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an accurate depiction. It's just one of the things we use to remind ourselves of our faith.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's a great way to, I think, especially with stained glass and all that, to tell the story. And particularly when you go back to the Middle Ages or Martin Luther's time, that's how people knew the stories, was from the stained glass in the churches, and or what they heard, because many didn't read, of course. So that they could see those stories and so forth being depicted in the glass. And so, yeah, John, you had a comment?
So I don't think it really matters. Like going back to that one thing we had a while back with like him revealing himself with the words.
Yeah.
And I think Jesus purposely did it to make him look like plain, because it's not about what he looks like, it's what he's saying.
Yeah.
And that theme is very present in John. It doesn't really matter what he looks like. It matters how we believe in him and how we react to him and how we.
Yeah. It's right. It's what he's doing, and it's what he's saying, right? And it's like, especially, he is also the incarnate Word of God, and John's particularly mentioned that, the Word became flesh. But it's the words that he says. And of course, when John's disciples tell him, of course, he's wondering, is this the guy to come? And of course, they tell him what's happening. He didn't, obviously saw him at his baptism, but he's still he's in prison and so forth. And he's still wondering, well, is this really him? But then when they tell him what he's doing, it's like, oh yeah, okay. He's fulfilling, obviously, the prophecies, and he's doing what the Messiah is supposed to do. And so for John, it's like, oh yeah, okay, this is the guy. But like you said, it's not important like what he looks like. We can speculate all we want about that, but it's what he does and what he says. Exactly. It's a good point. Kind of looking at moving down to the next part here, it says that the Son chooses to reveal the Father to some is not to be taken in an arbitrary sense, but it is a way of emphasizing that this revelation must be received purely as a gift of grace. So would someone look up 1 Timothy chapter 2, 3 through 5? Thank you.
This is good, and it is pleasing in the sight of God, our Savior, who desires all people to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. For there is one God, and there is one mediator between God and men, the man Christ Jesus, who gave himself as a ransom for all, which is the testimony given at the proper time. I read an extra verse. That was for the same sentence.
That's all right. The verse won't hurt. But yeah, and so the Son chooses to reveal the Father to some. Again, it's not sort of this arbitrary thing, but it's good and pleasing in the sight of who desires all people to be saved and come to knowledge of truth. And this verse just kind of tells us, yeah, there's one God, there's one mediator between God and men, Jesus Christ. And then kind of number 28 says, in light of this, who are the ones to whom the Son chooses to reveal the Father, and who are the ones from whom spiritual truth is hidden by the Father? So who are the ones that the Son chooses to reveal the Father, and who are the ones who aren't? And kind of going back to Matthew.
I think in Matthew, what the writer of this Bible study, if we're going back, is saying, well, he chooses to reveal himself to the little children and not to the wise,
Yeah.
or the understanding. But there's something that puzzles me about those verses that we've just read. So in John,
Oh, yeah.
in John 5, it says, the Father judges no one, but has given all judgment to the Son.
Yeah.
However, in 1 Timothy, Paul is saying, essentially, John, that Jesus is our intermediary. So we tend to think of Jesus as being our attorney.
Yes. Yeah.
Our advocate.
Mm-hmm.
But in John, we're hearing that Jesus is the judge who's making the decision, and that's a interesting contradiction.
It is. It's like, yeah, he's the advocate, but he's also the judge. It's like, okay.
He's our own courtroom.
It does seem like there's kind of a contradiction there.
He's also the victim, the one that gets the punishment.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
He's his own court.
In a way, it's like, yeah, he's kind of covering everything. Okay, so
He's
yeah,
judge.
you are condemned, or because of your sin, but I paid the penalty for you. and then of course, and then I'm advocating for you because I paid the penalty to the Father, and so it's like, I don't judge them or condemn them, because I've taken the condemnation, I've taken their punishment, I've done, and so it's interesting. It's kind of both and.
Well, and I guess it's partly just because our conception of justice and how we think justice works is based on the world and not on what happens in heaven or with Jesus.
Yeah, it's a different kind of justice that I think than we're used to. Because it's similar, but yet, yeah, it's different though, and and God judges differently than, I guess, than what the world, or what is fairness and what isn't, and things that we think that aren't fair. It's like, well, but that is what it is. Yeah, but I mean, ultimately, I mean, it's like he wants all people to be saved, and come to the knowledge of the truth. And because there's a tendency to think, well, but it sounds like he's just going to condemn everybody, and it's like, no, because that's why he sent Jesus, so we wouldn't be condemned, so that we would be saved, so that we wouldn't receive the punishment and that we deserve. But yeah, it's not quite the way that the world looks at things, thankfully, I think. Yeah, and so I think, yeah, certainly the Son chooses to reveal the Father, obviously, to, like going back to Matthew, to children, and those truths, and then kind of to withhold that truth, at least, or it's hidden from the wise and the discern, and those who are have more wisdom. But then it kind of says, Jesus, though familiar words of invitation that end this holy gospel, were based directly on the fact that he is the revealer of the Father. So who are the ones who labor and are heavy laden, and to whom Jesus extended his invitation? What do you think about that?
I think he's, well, because we go back to the beginning of chapter 11. He says he went, after he'd finished instructing his 12 disciples, he went from there to teach and preach in the cities. So he's talking to the multitude, and I think he's basically talking to anybody.
Yeah.
But the people who are listening are the common people, the laborers,
Right.
they're not the Pharisee class.
Mm.
They're the working class.
Right.
But I don't think that Jesus was saying you can't come to me unless you're a tradesman or a farmer, but those are the people who are most likely to be gathered to listen to him and be receptive to his message. I mean, the others might have been sitting out on the side to see whether they could catch him in a lie, but
Yeah.
but the people who were listening to his message to receive it were the ones who were beat down by life.
Yeah, I think so too. The ones that are, the more sort of common people, laborers and things. Yeah, I think that we're struggling and with many burdens and things, and didn't live lives of luxury or, because the religious leaders, certainly usually tend to be kind of more prominent or more well off, more comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
I think, in a lot of ways. And
Where did they get their money?
and that's sort of a good question. And I don't know.
Because you're not, when we get to Pharisees and Sadducees, we're no longer talking about the Levites only.
No, right. And Levites, everything's kind of provided in the temple, or they would eat the bread.
Right. Their daily bread was provided by the people. That was their tithe to feed the Levites. That whole tribe, that was their livelihood.
Exactly.
How did that morph into the Pharisees and Sadducees? And were they getting money from the tax collectors? How were they getting to be rich and famous?
I don't think they were necessarily that their profession was Pharisee.
No.
They're the leaders of the community. They're the people that folks look up to. It's more like
they're the CEOs of the company, and
to me it's more like how the bishop in a Mormon ward is usually someone who is successful. It's not the guy who sweeps floors at the elementary school.
No. I think you're right. I think they tended to be the more prominent individuals, in the community, the business leaders, or those who I think people kind of look to. And I think that there was a tendency for them to be a little bit more better off, I think, than others, and so I think they were the ones that were chosen to be the leaders because of their success, I think, in life. And so, because it's interesting because, and Jesus, sits down and has dinner. It, like with the text, like with, the one Pharisee, but it does seem to be that the text indicates that a lot of them tend to be a little more well off than other individuals. But I think it was those, like you said, Mark, that I think were chosen for that reason. They were prominent leaders, and and obviously there were, not all of them were bad, obviously. You have Nicodemus, obviously, that comes to Jesus and really wants to know, okay, what are you all about, or what is this? He comes in secret, of course, because he's kind of afraid, I think, of what others will think and what. But he's I think, obviously a prominent leader. So not everyone was kind of against them, but the majority, there were. So I think it's interesting. But I think it just was the prominent individuals that happened to be fairly well off for whatever reason. But you do kind of wonder you don't really know what their profession or what they did. So, I mean, we're not really privy.
I think about,
But
like these men who would sit at the temple gates and expound,
mm-hmm.
They might very well have been, they owned the flocks, but they had shepherds.
Yeah.
And so, or they had, there's that kind of class of people who could, could afford the time to take, it's kind of like who becomes a state legislator. A lot of them are lawyers, because they could take their time off and go do things, because they can make the money through other means.
Yeah, I think they have, other means. So you'd have to have, like you said, other means in order to have the time to be able to really study and expound on those things or biblical truths. And the common person doesn't, they're sort of laboring day to day, trying to put food on their table, or if they're, or most of the people would be in agriculture or again, or raising, or would be shepherds. And like I said, the shepherds probably weren't really the ones that owned the sheep. They're just looking after them, or they were hired hand.
Cheryl's found something interesting here.
Okay.
I Googled it.
Okay. What does Google say?
Google says the Pharisees were a political party.
Yeah.
Like asking how Republicans earn a living.
Yeah.
Pharisees had a range of trades and professions. The Apostle Paul was a Pharisee and called himself one long after his conversion. He made tents. Other Pharisees were professional scribes. They wrote documents for people. Presumably, they did most other jobs as well.
Mm-hmm.
They developed and controlled the synagogues, while their chief rivals, the Sadducees, controlled the temple. The Pharisees developed and controlled the synagogues, while their chief rivals, the Sadducees, controlled the temple.
Oh, okay.
The temple trade was probably operated and controlled by the Sadducees, as was the Sanhedrin, the Jewish parliament. However, there were plenty of Pharisees in Jerusalem, and some were members of the Sanhedrin, including Gamaliel and
Gamaliel, yeah.
He was the good guy at Jesus's
Right. And
sort of a good guy.
Yeah. I think they're.
Isn't he the one that spoke the truth of better to have one man die and?
I remember. I think so.
This is Gamaliel.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was. This is in Acts. It says.
Yeah.
When
he was. Yeah.
When they heard this, they wanted to kill. They wanted to kill Peter. But Gamaliel, a teacher of the law, held in honor by all the people, stood up and gave orders to the men, put the men outside for a little while. He said, "Take care what you're about to do," because, and he basically talks them out of it.
Yeah, that's right. Because that's how I remember. Yeah, him and right, he's prominent.
So it was more Peter he defended.
It's more Peter. Yeah, it wasn't.
Okay.
And I don't know. Yeah.
Well, and I'm not even sure if it was so much that he was defending them, and then as he was saying, if you kill these people, you might be sorry.
Yeah. Right. I think
it's going to spread like wildfire, because then there'll be a martyr.
Consider the political implications of stoning Peter.
Right. But right, yeah, and I think, we're talking about two different groups, and and the whole sort of the system of the synagogue and so forth, I think, developed kind of in the intertestamental period, and you kind of have sort of more local places of worship in a way, and during that period. And then and I think again, there's sort of some rivalry there. It's like, well, where, where's the place of, worship? Well, obviously, I mean, the temple, but also they obviously gathered together in the synagogues too. And so, yeah, you can probably see maybe there's some tension, I think, there between the two. And obviously there's the whole difference with Sadducees and not believing in the resurrection. So that was kind of one of the things that is pointed out in the text. So yeah, I mean, the people that are heavy burden and it's probably more, again, the sort of common people that are feeling that burden, and probably less likely the religious leaders. And then number, 130 says, a yoke is a wooden bar frame for which two draft animals are joined at the heads and necks so they can work together. But what does the analogy suggest about Jesus' promise to rest for your souls? I think.
Well, if we think, I always used to interpret this verse as thinking about how heavy a yoke is.
Oh yeah,
And I always thought it was interesting because in chapter 10 of Matthew, it's talking about, well, you're going to have to take up your cross and it's going to be everything. And now we're going to say my yoke is easy. But I think what makes it easy is because it's a yoke, because it means you're sharing the burden.
Yeah.
And so what he's saying is, if you share your burden with me,
yes,
you will have, you'll find rest for your souls, because, I will take, ultimately he's saying, he's hinting at the fact that he will take
The whole thing.
thing onto his shoulders.
Yeah. I think couldn't have said it better. I mean,
well, isn't it true that when two animals are yoked together, they can pull more than each of them combined added together?
Yeah.
Exactly. To them alone, and then you add that together, the two joined can pull more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to do with the physics of vectors of force, but yeah.
Yes,
exactly.
So,
and friction.
Right.
But like Mark is saying, when you're yoked to Jesus, not only is he taking more than his half out of the middle, he's taken the whole shooting match.
Yeah. And and I guess and they would always sort of try to have two animals that were pretty similar, comparable in size and strength. So that they're evenly yoked, right?
But we're not.
We're not, right? So I think Jesus makes up for the slack when we can't. He's able to. Yeah, I think it's a great way to look at it. He's able to help us pull the load. Okay, last question, and I think we're at the time. So what promise is implicit in Jesus' invitation to learn from him as we wear his yoke? And how have you experienced the truth of Jesus' words in your life as a disciple? So first question, what do you think about that? So what can we learn from learn from him as we wear his yoke?
Well, I think what's implied is what Mark said, that he's going to carry the whole load.
Yeah.
Already has.
Right.
He took it all to the cross and it's done in it.
Right. Yeah. We have a heavy load, but yeah, we could do it. We can bear it, because Jesus is like laboring right alongside us. It's not like he's someplace else and just sort of watching us struggle
from a distance.
Right. No. No, it's like, but he's right there, right, with us. Again, this analogy of the yoke and helping us carry that burden and while maybe it forces us to trust him too. And have you experienced the truth of Jesus' words in your life, maybe as a disciple? What about?
It reminds me of the poem about, or the picture, or whatever it is, of the footprints.
In the sand.
Yeah,
It's the same deal. Why is there only one set of footprints?
yes,
Because he's carrying you, and with the yoke, he's basically carrying you there too. He's carrying it all.
yeah. I think there's some biblical.
Just kind of going along for the ride, not
Yeah.
much contribution from us.
Right. Right. I think that picture, I'm familiar with too. There's definitely some biblical and some principles. And I think this principle here is definitely happening in that. And that he's, at times I think he's probably carrying the whole load. When we can't, or we just, we're not able to. Yeah. I think so too. That, I think whatever happens in our lives, that whatever burdens that come our way or struggles, that, he's there with us and struggling with us and helping us, through that. I think as a disciple, and that, we're not bearing these burdens or things by ourselves. And we don't have this, we have a big, it's a task here, and there's people that need to hear the news, but he's with us and he's going to take care of us no matter what. So, yeah, exactly. Any other thoughts about that? Oh, it's like we're right at time. So,
Yes.
unless there's any other questions, shall we close then with the Lord's Prayer? All right. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
All right, thanks everyone, and certainly I guess I'll see some of you here in a few minutes. So,
All right.
all right, God bless and have a blessed 4th. So.